We are in Parshas Chukat, and there's an incredible yisod that I want to show from this. We know the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, we don't know, but the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Chaf Amud Bet, says an incredible idea. Who is the Malach HaMavet? Who's the one that comes to take a person away when his final days are near? The person is a goses, he's about to find, he's Male Einayim, he's a scary little figure, he's a scary figure with thousands of eyeballs, looking at the person. And listen to this. The Gemara, this is a Gemara, this is not a Midrash, not a Zohar, nothing. A Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Chaf Amud Bet says that at the time that a person passes away, or he's about to pass away, he stands on top of him, the Malach HaMavet stands on top of him, and his charva shlufa biyado, he's holding the sword in his hand. On the edge of the cherev, on the edge of the sword, it has a few drops of poison, mara, it's called, of poison on top of it. But he's got to get that mara into the person's mouth. So he shows himself to the guy who's not feeling well, and the guy goes, in absolute fear and trepidation, out of fear, he opens up his mouth, and boom, the drop of mara, the drop of poison falls into the person's mouth, and lo aleinu velo aleichem, bar minan, the person passes away. That's how the person passes away, by getting that piece of mara. Now that is the lashon of the Gemara over there. From the Gemara says, me'ota tipa, from that tipa who met, he dies. Me'ota mimena masriach, he also, his body decomposes. O mimena padav marikot, and he also, as we all know, that a person who decomposes, also his face turns white, he becomes very pale. The fails, and of course that's where the decomposing takes place. Now the lashon of the Zohar, coincidentally enough, the Zohar does bring the same exact thing. So you have two Eidim, you also have the Gemara, also Sod and also Pshat. But the only thing is, the Zohar says something a little bit different. He says not just one drop, but he drops 3 drops. The first drop is there, that he makes him die. The second one is to make him smell. And the third drop is to make him decompose or turn pale. Okay, whether it's 1 drop or 3 drops, I can't tell you. B'ezrat Hashem, I won't know. But Al Kol Panim, that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara continues over there, and brings from the father of Shmuel that had a nice conversation with the Malach HaMavet. You know, these things happen sometimes. He had a nice shmooze with the Malach HaMavet. He was sitting down with a cup of coffee. And when he was talking to them, he said, the Malach HaMavet said to this, wild Gemara. The Gemara says, if it wasn't for the covet of Briot, the Malach HaMavet said, if it wasn't because of the covet of people, I would take my sword and I would shech them with the sword like you shech a behema, like you shech an animal. I would slaughter them at the neck, just like he does a behemoth. So the Gemara has a contradiction. One second, you're telling me that he wants to shecht him? I thought you said that he kills him with a sword with the poison. So the Gemara says, well, the truth is, the drops of poison that falls in a person's mouth, it disintegrates the simanim, the trachea and the kanav veshet, the trachea and the esophagus, get dissolved from the piece of poison that falls inside of him, and that's how a person passes away. Like I said, should never be relevant for all of us. Now, of course, no one wants this to be relevant for us, and we want to avoid this. The better option, if you can take a choice, if you get multiple choice, take the mita neshika, which occurred by Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, of course, or al tzadikim, that they die with the mita neshika. And therefore, you can avoid the Malach HaMavet. Now, what's the way to avoid this horrific type of death and to get away from the Malach HaMavet? So it's definitely a great eitzah, which I'm going to give you right here on Torah Anytime to be able to figure out how to get away from this problem. And that is a Gemara in Shabbat that quotes a pasuk in this week's Parsha, in Parshas Chukot. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara in Shabbat, of course, is on Pei Gimel Amud Bet on the bottom over there. It's a famous Gemara that says, Lo'olam al yimneh adam et atzmo mi beit midrash u mi divrei Torah. A person should never stop himself from learning, going to Beit Midrash, learning divrei Torah. You know why? Afilu b'shat mita. This is the Nakud I want to bring out. People know usually the next drush over there, that a person should be meimin tatzmo al Torah, that a person should die on Torah, he should give over himself to Torah. But over here the Gemara says more than that. Even b'shat mita, even when a person's on his last legs, he's in his last chance, he knows there's only a little bit more time left. So even at that time, you should never stop learning divrei Torah. Shneimar zot aTorah adam ki yamut be'oil, as we have over here in Parshas Chukot. The person, they learn from the idea of ki yamut be'oil, that a person dies in oil. Even at that time, zot Torah. You should be connected to the Torah. It should be there. He should be osek bet Torah. Now the Panim Yafet, that's the hafla, that's the Rabbi of the Chatam Sofer. That's the Rav Pinchas Halevi Horowitz, one of the great Gdolim of yesteryear, from the early 1800s, way before he was the Rebbe of the Chatam Sofer, like I pointed out. He was great, from one of the great Chassidish masters. He writes in a sefer Panim Yafot ala Torah, Parim Yafot, which are many pilpulim on the Torah. He asked, 1 second, I have a kasha. Everybody knows the Gemara in Shabbat and Daf Lamed, that over there the Gemara says about David HaMelech that he knew that he was supposed to die on Shabbat, so he wanted to avoid that. He didn't want the Malach Mavet to get the best of him, so you know what he did? He was learning Yom HaValayla. He was doing it anyways, Loi Pasuk Mipume, but he was learning Yom HaValayla, and the Malach Mavet was so annoyed. I can't get my hands on this guy. I want to kill him. How do I get rid of him? How am I able to get him? And because he was so busy learning all the time, he wasn't able to get him. Of course, we know there was a rustling of trees outside. David HaMelech walked outside, and because he stopped for 1 second from his learning, the stair underneath him broke, he fell, and David HaMelech died at the age of 70 years old. That's the Maaseh over here. So it asks the flaw, the Ponim Yafot, 1 second, we see that when a person learns, the Malach Mavet can't get you. And as much as a person is busy learning, so he can't get you. So how is it that over here we darshan that a person should be osek b'Torah even at the time of mitah? If he's osek b'Torah b'shad mitah, so he's never going to die. So he's not going to be able to die. You're telling me that a person is busy learning all the time. So he says a big chiddush, and this is our eitzah to be able to get out of this problem that we mentioned before. He says there's a difference between mita neshika and mita malach hamavet. The malach hamavet can only get to someone who stops learning, who's not learning. But if you're learning, a person might end up dying, even if he's in the middle of learning. He's in the middle of the process of learning, like we'll give you examples soon. But even though he's in the process of learning, he's going to die in mita neshika. He's going to die in a very nice way, in a pleasant way, just like a hair that's pulled out of the milk. It's going to be done in a pleasant way that won't happen from the Malach HaMavet b'kvoidoi u be'atzmoi. A person is able to avoid it. So at least from here we see the incredible power, the strength, the special present, the matana that we have that we call the Torah. The present that we have of Talmud Torah. How do people waste time? How do they use up minutes on Dvarim Shel Mabekach when you have an option of a newspaper or Masil Tesharim to be able to go ahead when you see the power of the Torah, of course the mitzvah of the Torah, which we know of course is Keneged Kulam as everyone says, but even more than that, look at the strength of the Torah. It protects you from all nezek. When a person is orangutan, as they say, shaku in his Torah, it's there as a protection device. It leaves people to be able to, it saves you from nezek, it saves you lo aleinu from the Malach HaMavet, or from dying lo aleinu, a gruesome death. And that's why, even when a person is on his last legs, lo aleinu, it should never be relevant, like I said, but if a person knows a relative, a parent who they know, and there's not much more. So of course we know in your day in Siman Shem Lamed Chet it's Pascha that we have to teach them vidui, and we have to not scare them when we teach them vidui. We have to say everyone does vidui, and it's kedai to do it just to be able to do tshuva before a person dies, and it's a very important phenomenon to be able to do that, and that's very, very chashuv. But at the same time, second to none, then a person what should be doing besides that is learning Torah. Those last days should be there learning Torah, not wasting time discussing other things, as the Sefer Chinuch writes in Siman Taf Yutet, Ve'ad emeta chayav, until where is a person chayav to learn Torah? Ad yomoto, until the day of his death. Pen yisor milevavcha kol yemei chayecha, until the day. And he brings hifligu chachamim bedavar derech hamusar lelamed b'nei adam chefetz, in order that people should understand the greatness of the Torah. And he quotes the Gemara we just quoted in Shabbat, that even at the time when a person dies, afilu b'sham mita chayav adam lilmod Torah zot Torah adam ki yamad be'oil, what we have in our parsha. So we see the incredible necessity, the importance, and the absolute imperative point for us to be able to be learning Torah constantly. It's a protection device for us, but even on these last days, don't waste them on Dvarim Shel Mabekach, as the Rabban Paskins in Ilchos Talmud Torah, in Perek Aleph, Halacha Yud, Pen Yisur Milvavcha, Sheyilma Torah Gam B'Yom HaMitah. So we have many mekorot to this phenomenon that even to the last days and the last legs, a person should try to go out of his way to be able to do it. Of course, there's a big contrast. No, there's a big contrast that unfortunately, and I hear many stories like this, was one comes to head as I speak, is unfortunately when people, there's always that famous question. What would you do if you were told you only have that 1 month left to live? Well, a person should never have such a proclamation, but if such a thing, we know there's always that question. I actually know a specific story of someone whose mother, of course, was completely not religious. She was maybe even 180 degrees, if I could say the other direction. But anyways, when she found out that yes, she found a terminating disease, right? And she knew that she doesn't have much more. They gave her 3 months. They gave her 3 months to be able to survive. So what did she do? She did what every good Jew would do. She used this child's Yerusha money, all the inheritance money. She bought herself a very fancy trailer, like a caravan trailer with a with a big back with a couple apartments in the back over there with the whole thing. You could drive around. And she did a tour all across America, from sea to shining sea, to be able to go ahead and see the Grand Canyon, the Niagara Falls, to be able to make sure that she can get every site before, and this would literally would happen in the process of the trip. She ended up dying. She ended up not being able to even, poor woman didn't even make the whole entire trip, but Baruch Hashem, she was able to see the Grand Canyon. I'm saying that's at the end of the day, that's what they're able to do. When a person has no tachlit to where they're supposed to go, then that's what they have. They don't have much else to be able to look forward to. And we know the stories of people that say that people are drowning in the Titanic. That was their last minutes, and what did they use it for? Many people know the stories that it wasn't necessarily for the most positive type of events that a person can do. And therefore, a person has to know that we have the special present that we have, even in a time of mitah, even when the day's over and when there's not much left, to know that there is. So here I'm going to bring you a couple just quick stories of people that we all are familiar with that did similar ideas, that even b'shat mitah, they took advantage of the death. And there's a special thing that's brought in the Sfarim HaKadoshim, the Zohar, and other places, that also b'shat mitah you get special kochot. You get kochot me'al me'ever, beyond your capabilities in general, what you would have thought you could do. You get a special inspirational extra power to be able to do things you would have done. Who Milanu God? Of course, we're not comparable to him, but at least we should see the story of Moshe Rabbeinu. The whole entire Sefer Torah was written basically towards the end of his life, from Vayelech and Nitzavim and Hazinu and Zot HaBracha. That was all done on the last day. He wrote 13 Sifrei Torah in the last day of his life. Don't try that for size. I don't recommend it. That's not going to happen. But he wrote 13 Sifrei Torah. Plus he gave all the brachot to all the Shvatim, as we know, and all the brachot and all the tzivuyim that he gave over there. None other than Moshe Rabbeinu at that time was able to do it. Rishon Bar Yochai, as we all know, Rishon Bar Yochai, in the last day of his death, it's on Lag BaOmer, according to most of the Mefarshim, gave over the whole entire sod, the Idrizuta he gave over all the sodot that he didn't give over until then, to his Talmidim. All the ideas and the secrets that we know from the Zohar are based on that wonderful day when he actually passed away, which is not so wonderful, but he was able to give over a tremendous amount, as it's written in the Zohar in Parshas Va'azinu, Ki Shem Tziva Hashem et bracha. By the time when he was Yotze Nishmato, it says over there that after finishing giving it over, that's the pasuk that he ended up dying. When he passed away, Ki Shem Tziva Hashem et bracha, he ended up with the word bracha on his lips. That's what it is. And we find that many times, the Gemara in Sanhedrin. And Samechet, Rabbi Eliezer Gadol, the famous Rabbi Eliezer Gadol, who was one of the biggest Tanaim that we have. He was put in Cherem because he was so big and he was always right. But he did it with a certain strength. At the time that he died, Nichnasu elav Rabbi Akiva v'chaver, all his Talmidim came, including Rabbi Akiva. And over there they asked him, what do you do? Here he is, your Rebbe is dying. He's only there, he's got a day or two left. And what did they do? They were mepalpil in Tumah V'Tara. He's going to die, so he's going to be tameh. So they started talking to him in Hilchas Tumah V'Tara. Can you imagine? Until Yotze Nishmato, when he answered, they asked him a question, and he said the word is tahor, and he was nifter. So they said Yotze Nishmata with the word tahor. The Gemara B'Metzion Daf Pei brings a machloket if someone's Torah tamei by Tazri, if the hair came first or the Bahar came first, if the color came first or not. And over there they asked Rabbi Bar Nachmani, he said tar, and he died. And that's when he passed away. Yotze Nishmato Bekach, and that's what the Bat Kol over there, the Gemara says, Ashrech Rabbi Bar Nachmani, Shel Guf Chatar v'Nishmat Chatar. Meaning he was busy saying the word tar, but in halacha. He was busy orangutan in halacha, b'shad mitato, Kesef Mishnah, an incredible Kesef Mishnah, in Tumat Sarat and Bet Tet brings the reason why the Rambam did not paskin like Rabbi Ben Nachmani. Over there, the Rambam paskins not like Rabbi Ben Nachmani. He paskins it's tamei. And the Kesef Mishnah says, the Maran, the Shulchan Aruch, he says why? He says because since he said it at the time when he was passing away, and the Bat Kol said it, it's loy b'shamayim. It's kilo came from a shamayim. That psak came beruach hakodesh. It came not with a person. It was way above. So the Rambam held that wasn't enough. One more story, which is a story brought in the Divrei Torah, that's Munkat Sharav. He brings over there a Maisa Nifla from, he has a Kabbalah from his Zaydi, from the Bnei Yisachar, about the Baalei Tosfot. The Baalei Tosfot, unfortunately, as we all know, they were during the time of the Crusades, many of them, and unfortunately many were killed. Some even had to kill themselves in order to avoid being converted, lo aleinu, to the religion of Christianity, which people think are so pleasant these days, but people don't realize that they were 20 times worse than the Arabs are these days, what they used to do to us. And anyways, during these crusades, many of the Tosfim died. There was a tour, he didn't say exactly how many, but there were a few that were locked up and they were being ready to be set out to be killed the next day. They were going to be set out to the next. They were going to give them the choice. Do you want to be burnt at the stake or do you want to be netzer to become Christian? We all know what they would do. So that night, how do you spend that night? I would probably be pacing back and forth like Eichmann was, pacing back and forth in absolute fear about what's going to happen tomorrow. What did they do? They were writing big Tossim. He says Perek Meruba. If you look in Perek Meruba, that's the 7th Perek in Baba Kama. They have humongous Tossim, one of incredible pilpulim back and forth on lines of Gemara. There's only a few lines of Gemara. Lamashal and Daf Ayin Zayin over there and others. He says those Tossim were written on that night. That's when they wrote them. During that night, those were massive mamish in depth. Not just that they were learning, but they were mamish. They had tremendous siyata d'shmaya to write such Tossim. They're very difficult Tossim. With the back and forth that goes. And these are the doilim that we have, how they spend their last minutes, how they're able to die b'mitzvah in the shika because of the special plan. It's very connected, of course, to just now. We're in Tafshin Pei Gimel, as we have it, and Rav Gershon Edelstein, as we all know, the pictures of him sitting in the hospital. He put on his coat, he put on his tie, and he gave shir lying down in the hospital over there in Shari Tzedek. Even though while he was lying down with his thing, but he wanted to make sure that he was dressed. And he finished the shir. He gave the shir the day that he died. He gave shir. And right when he finished, he asked someone to give him a pen and paper, and he started writing Mar Makomos for tomorrow's shir. And they have a printout of the paper. You see him writing the Mar Makomos, and then eventually a long line drawn from the last word, and you just see a long line to the bottom of the page. And Bezeh Yatzah Nishmato B'Tahor. He was in the middle of writing his Mar Makomos for the next thing. These are our Gdolim. This is the way we deal with things. We have meaning to life. We have a Torah that's given to us as a present, and that's why many times we find this phenomenon that we take advantage of every minute that it can happen. As we know, Rashi in two places, Rashi in Makot and Daf Yutet Amud Bet. Over here it says Rabbeinu Gufoy Tar v'Yatza Nishmato B'Tara v'Lod Pirush Yoter. And Makot and Daf Yutet over there is where the Pirush of Rashi stops and his grandson the Rivon takes over. And also, if we know Baba Batra and Daf Chavtet, over here it says Kan Met Rashi. Over here he passed away. The Chida writes in Shem Gdolim, he was in the middle of two Masechtas simultaneously at the time that he died. He was mamish in the middle of writing his Pirush. He already wrote a Pirush on Aleph Shas, by the way. This was already his third draft. He was on his third draft that he was putting out because he wanted to perfect it, and that's why we don't have Rashi in the end of these Masechtas, and Baba Batra and Makot, because he was in the middle of writing on both of them at the same time. This is the beauty of our Gdolim people. These are the things to appreciate of where we have, and that really makes us understand. I saw in the Sefer Niflaot Torah, that's Rav Zicherman, that he brings from the Rashmi Shantz, that brings from the Ve'kitzot ha'ita sichecha, a pasuk in Mishlei. Ve'kitzot ha'ita sichecha, what is that? So he says that the Midrash brings, I couldn't find this Midrash, that's why I don't know what this Midrash is, but anyways, he brings from the Midrash, Ve'kitzot ha'ita sichecha, the Rashmi brings a Midrash that says, the Kevan, sometimes a person dies when he's in the middle of a Masechta, and he's in the middle of mamish of writing it, so he says, Muftach loy, Ve'kitzot, when he comes back in Tchiyat HaBeitim, ha'ita sichecha, that's going to be your sicha. That's what you're going to be speaking about. The person, Lo Aleinu, who died in the middle of a Masechta, that pen, that stoppage, boom, you're coming back. Like Yosef Atzadik with Egla Rufa, right? He came back to Yaakov Avinu, he said, don't worry, I'm still in the middle of Egla Rufa. Here I am, Tchiyat HaMeitim, I'm coming back. He doesn't, Bekani Nachta, Ubekan Tesayamuta. You stopped over here and you're still going to finish. You never stop in the middle. Don't ever think that it's end, and we're going to end with a famous story. Could be, it's brought in the Menorah Ma'or, it's a very popular story. But it's very matim for what we're discussing now. Well, that's the famous, there was a certain person, the Menorah Ma'or brings from a Midrash, it's in Hilchot Talmud Torah in Menorah Ma'or, a certain person who used to be midboded, used to hang up by himself in a room and he used to learn Chagiga, Maseches Chagiga over and over and over again. He did hundreds, probably even thousands of times. He knew it word for word Baal Peh. He wasn't the smartest guy in the world. It wasn't a natural, but he made sure till he got it Baal Peh. This was his Masechta Lo Olam Haba, which is a whole sugi in itself. It's not for now. This was his Olam Haba Masechta. He knew every word Baal Peh. When he was in the middle of learning Maseches Chagiga one time, he keeled over and he died. He passed away, he had a heart attack, and he was nifter. But nobody knew. Poor guy lived alone. He didn't have a wife, and there was children. He was on his own, and nobody knew. And he was there, lying down there, and suddenly there was a woman who was crying. Woo! She was crying. Oh, she was crying about this poor man, and everybody came from the town, looking what happened. She goes, "Oh, my husband, he was nifter. My husband was nifter. Please, can you guys help him? Help him." can you take him and be maspid and buried? They said, sure. They took him and they buried him, gave him, and she made him a promise. I swear to you, I promise whoever gives good espedim, who buries him and gives, they will get a big chelik in Olam Haba. She gave Avtacha, I promise you, I tell you, you'll be able to get a big chelik in Olam Haba. And so therefore there was big espedim, and they spoke about him, and this. They knew about this quiet little guy in the town that no one ever knew too much about. And they gave their hespedim, and they gave him a proper burial and everything. And that's what it was. When it was over, after the hespedim, everybody was walking away, and this lady was walking away. On the way that she was walking away, another person asked her, by the way, what's your name, Mrs. Lady? We didn't even know you were around. We never saw you in the time. Her name was Maseches Chagiga, and she disappeared. She walked out into the dusk, and there she was never seen again. Maseches Chagiga came and was Tovei Shaloi, because that was his partner. His partner was Maseches Chagiga, meaning it's a mitziyut. The fact that a person learns that thing is what protects you from the malach hamavit, that protection idea, it's something real, it's something actual. It's not just an idea, it's a real concept that exists. And that will be there to protect you up in the higher worlds. That'll protect you from the malach hamavit. That'll give you your chelik in olam haba. And therefore, everybody should know to be able to utilize their time to its fullest. Shabbat shalom.